Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to put on a very specific hat. I want you to think of yourself as a predictive analyst, kind of like a quantitative historian. Because, when we look back at human history, or frankly, even just watch the news today, it's incredibly easy to see a random, chaotic series of wars and ideological shifts. But what if it isn't? What if history is actually a highly predictable, measurable thermodynamic cycle? Today, we're going to view civilization strictly as a mechanical engine, operating entirely under the first and second laws of thermodynamics.
Okay, let's dive right into this and outline our logical framework for analyzing the historical system. We're going to break this down into 5 parts. 1. Civilization as a battery. 2. Installing the dogmatic patch. 3. The Shahnameh system reboot. 4. Re-importing the stagnant software. And 5. Recharging the human engine.
Section 1. Civilization as a battery. The baseline system.
So, to really understand how human history functions, we have to anchor our entire analysis in the absolute bedrock of physical reality. It literally all comes down to the laws of thermodynamics, right? Energy is transformed and entropy constantly increases. Now, when the Earth's climate is stable and resources are abundant, humans default to this highly functional, scientific baseline. The sources identify this as Ahuramazdan reasoning. Think of it as a functional metric. It's the objective measurement of the energy we use to build civilization. Essentially, this is humanity operating at absolute peak efficiency.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when we look at our macro framework. A civilization powering up is an engine of creation. It's driven by objective measurement and science. But when that battery powers down and we enter an entropic state, things look totally different. Faced with resource depletion, human systems abandon that scientific baseline and swap it for dogmatic control. This is characterized by rigid heaven and hell binaries, Abrahamic systems, and above all else, fear.
So, how do we actually transform this energy mechanically? Well, the physical universe consists of 2 poles, the creative force, which is Ormazd, and the decaying entropic force, Ahriman. The spark generated right between them is chi, or the Y, and it's generated through Kavi, which is really just a term for skepticism in questioning. You, as a human being, are the physical pivot in this system. By exercising your free will and curiosity, you are literally transforming energy in a clinical, mechanical process. It's fascinating.
Moving on to Section 2, installing the dogmatic patch, the climate glitch.
So what happens when that optimal thermodynamic baseline starts to fail? Well, we have to look to the climate. History shows us this incredibly measurable cycle of climate-driven shifts. When resources deplete, the societal battery completely drains and fear sets in. To manage a suddenly starving population, ruling systems install anti-thermodynamic software. We see this sequentially throughout time. The Sumerian decline brought Hammurabi's code. Collapsing Roman and Egyptian eras saw the installation of Christianity. And as climate change devastated the Sasanian Empire, Islam was imposed.
Take Hammurabi's code, for instance. It wasn't just a set of legal rules. From our system's perspective, it was the very first moralistic binary patch. It effectively replaced the natural scientific law of the Sumerian era with a static, highly punitive code. It was an emergency override designed to maintain control during a period of extreme resource depletion.
So, the crucial point is that we really need to classify these historical developments not as spontaneous spiritual awakenings, but as rigid control mechanisms. In both the post-Sumerian and Sasanian collapses, a severe drop in resources directly correlates with the installation of a dogmatic patch. These control systems treated the world as a static battlefield of good versus evil, which effectively silenced the engine of reason.
Section 3. The Shahnameh system reboot, restoring the engine.
Now, systems don't stay down forever. As the Earth's climate stabilized during the Mongol correction, energy returned and the dogmatic patch began to fail. But here's the amazing part. The original software hadn't actually been lost. It was preserved entirely offline through scene-be-scene, which means chest-to-chest oral transmission. Think of it like humanity's original encrypted hard drive. This allowed for a massive systemic reboot of Iranian civilization, which was codified by Ferdowsi Shahnameh. It fully reinstalled the ancient software of choice and free will.
And with that software reboot came a supercritical hardware reboot, the return of the Majistan. This was the original democratic system of governance. By organizing society efficiently through decentralized satrapies, it restored the foundational thermodynamic order that had been entirely suppressed by dogmatic authoritarianism.
Notice how the famous maxim, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, isn't just some nice moral platitude. It's actually a highly specific, mechanical, three-part process. Engaging in this sequence generates the chi we talked about earlier. It creates the next Ahuramazdan and actively drives human evolution forward, pushing back against the entropic decay of Ahriman.
Section 4. Re-importing the stagnant software, the modern reinfection.
Unfortunately, as we progress into the fourth climate change, we can observe a pretty severe systemic regression. As the Mongolia era order buckled, the system became vulnerable to malware all over again. The sources highlight figures like Al-Hilli, returning from his Indian education, and much later, Ayatollah Khomeini in the modern era. Clinically speaking, these figures acted as direct vectors for a dogmatic reinfection. They leveraged climate-driven anxiety and utilized stagnant, end-of-the-world messianic narratives. By convincing the population that structural, physical shifts were actually mystical events, they locked the control system firmly back into place.
Let's move to and see how this builds when we map these two operating systems side by side. The contrast is just stark. The optimal Ahuramazdan engine uses the Majistan mechanism to output free will and curiosity. Meanwhile, the dogmatic reinfection uses messianic mysticism to output an anti-thermodynamic control loop. It is high entropy and very high fear.
So this brings us to the absolutely critical, analytical question of our time. If civilization is currently trapped in a fear-based, anti-thermodynamic control loop driven by messianic dogma, how do we actually break it?
Section 5. Recharging the human engine, the Ameshaspenta baseline. To break the loop, the solution requires a total clearing of the messianic software and a return to our operational baseline. And the framework for that baseline is the Ameshaspenta. These are the 7 principles of nature, representing the physical, thermodynamic laws governing reality. To cure the crippling anxiety of Ahriman worship, this modern obsession with fear, decay, and dogma, we have to return to this purely physical framework. It is literally the only reliable operating system for building a sustainable, forward-moving civilization.
So the mandate derived from all this historical data is crystal clear. We must abandon the messianic dogma. It is an outdated patch for a glitch we absolutely have to outgrow. We need to measure, deduce, and finally, restart the battery of reason. If we don't clear this anti-thermodynamic software from our collective systems, we guarantee our own entropy. So I'll leave you with this. What happens to our shared future if we fail to execute this systemic reboot and choose to just remain powered down in the dark, rather than turning the engine back on?